Hey, Amanda. Hey, I want to show you what I know about art, and this won't take very long, but it will take a bit. So I use this program called Anime Studio. It was $40. It was dirt cheap, and it's been real good to me. So I have what they call a Wacom, which can be picked up for like $250, and just a cheap desktop computer, which will work. Any computer will work for Photoshop these days. You don't have to have any sophisticated rig. Well, yeah, let's do that. Okay, so whenever we do lines, like for lined art, lines that are straight or curved in a uniform way tend to look best. And so if we look at cartoon's completely based on the principle of smooth lines. You probably already know this. But essentially what we have is a bunch of uniform lines, and almost anything you draw will look good with uniform lines, and the more sophisticated the lines get, the better the line art is. But you don't have to do anything fancy just to cartoon. This is a pretty sophisticated piece, to be honest with you. Well, I guess that brings us into the next conversation, which is value. It turns out that we have a few things that are important when it comes to art. Our priorities, I guess you could call it. And so, like, this is a great example of how color doesn't matter. The relationship between black and white matters. So in this orange square right here, they have an orange that is the right amount of black and white to produce highlights or shadows, and that's how we get depth. So anytime we're mixing paints, we know that the relationship between black and white is more important than the relationship between color. Just what I was looking for. You're already picking up on some of the stuff that everybody knows or everybody uses, but I'm not sure if you know it yet. So whenever we paint, I'm trying to find a good example. Having a hard time with it. This is a good example of black versus white, the way it works. Black and white is more important than blue, but these are all a blue that's more black over here and a blue that's more white over here to give depth. And if we look at landscapes, painting. So there's the rule of the large and the rule of the small. In the rule of the large, things get whiter as they go away from you. And so this grass right here, let's find a better example. This mountain right here is it goes from black to white on landscapes. But as we're painting things close, things go from black to white the other way, if that makes sense. And so what you're looking to do is kind of fool the eye. So whenever somebody paints hair, you don't need to paint every hair. You don't need to paint every leaf. You don't need to paint every flower petal. It turns out that there's a part of our brain, I think it's the exorder portion, the part in the back that controls your visual, which groups things into bunches. And so obviously people could have, 100,000 or 1 million hairs or however many people have, but you couldn't make that many pencil swipes. It would just be ridiculous. And so you trick the brain into grouping hair into things into bunches. And so the same thing applies to landscapes. When we group things into bunches, that's how the brain would interpret it anyway. And our visual acuity is actually only clear right in the center of where we see stuff. We see stuff very fuzzy off to the sides. We only have enough perception right in front of us to see a human face pretty much in clarity, but it seems like we have more than that. And so knowing how to paint is knowing how the brain works. And so when somebody's looking at this painting, there's going to be a visual point that people's eyes are drawn to. For example, this tree is probably a good one. This is good. And everything else kind of lacks detail compared to the thing that you're focusing on. And you as the artist get to pick what you're focusing on. There is a documentary, a real short one, called 4 Artists Paint 4 Trees. And in this video, Disney takes 4 of his artists, and 4 artists paint 1 tree. 4 artists paint one tree. Not that it matters, but and so he takes these 4 guys out to a place in nature, and he has them all paint the same tree, and their art comes back wildly different, each one of them. And really, really good way to understand that you're not going to do it all the same, and you shouldn't do it all the same. That's one of my favorites. In fact, I don't know if you can see it right now, but I am recreating that one over on a plank. I also use a plank. I also paint on board, and this looks like it's a piece of fairly nice board, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's ash or what that is, but and the white over here against the colors provides a great contrast. What's really hard to do is paint in a situation where you can't paint the negative line. Like if you were to have this whole thing covered in paint, you could fix all your mistakes. But this is a situation where you can't fix your mistakes if you go outside of something you're not intending to paint, which is a little bit riskier as an artist, but I think that's cool if that's what you picked. Yeah, I like it. I like it. Is that a 4-leaf clover? I think you took your... No, that's 3. Okay. Well, and so that's it. We talked about our values as an artist. Oh yeah, one more important thing before we get to that. Nobody puts a violin in a kid's hand and says, "Make your own music, kid." Nobody does that, you know? It's preposterous. And so somewhere along the way, people had this idea of, well, you copied it, right? And well, maybe tracing is an exact copy. But if you look at a piece of art and you want to recreate it, which I highly, highly suggest, it's a lot harder than you think. And it builds all the same stuff. In fact, that's exactly where you start. But somebody's going to come along and say, you didn't paint that, you copied it, right? But that's how the arts work. I will sit in a worship service where the music team plays somebody else's song, and they're like, you did such a great job at this. And then nobody says to the musical artist, well, you just copied someone else's song. They view it as cheating, and they really shouldn't. But our priorities in painting are homeschooled as well. 1, shape. 2, relationship between black and white. This is really important. You can paint anything in the whole world you want to paint with just black and white. You know what I mean? Like, the color is not as important as that. And it has to do, this is again with the way that the body works. The brain has these things called rods and cones, and I think the rods pick up light levels, and I think the cones pick up colors. I might have that backwards, but our relationship with black and white is everything. We have to get that aspect of it absolutely right. We can mess up on the color and people won't notice quite as much, but the relationship between black and white has to be spot on. And so what I'll do if I'm mixing paints is this is a cheap, I already told you about that. I'll take my paints and say I'm painting with red's a nice color to paint with. Red. I will, hold on, technical difficulties. Okay. I will take my paints I will mix them up between the blackest red I'm going to paint and then the whitest red I'm going to paint, right? Turn my opacity here. I'll mix me up some colors. Well, let's do it this way. It'll be easier to understand. If I'm painting reds, I'll mix up just a little bit of all of these reds right here. And that'll be how I draw my color palette. So again, oh, this was my opacity's turned down. My opacity up. And that'll be the colors. And you see how they walked more to, I should have done it more like that, I guess. Be like that, like that, like that, and like that. And so I could use those to paint like a whole farm scene, like the farm building would be the thing closest to, no, the farm building would be this. And then the thing behind it, which would be like the ground maybe, I could do with this. That looks fine. Just bump it manually. And then the first row of trees could be right here. I'll make some bushes. And then the background would be this color. And they all work with relationship to black and white, and that's how you achieve distance, or something close. If I wanted to paint a flower, I would take the most black I have, and I would kind of do like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. I would get a smaller brush, I'd go more toward white, more toward white, more toward white, more toward white. I'll go this way right here. And it almost helps in your painting like this if you're a little sloppy, because your imagination will kind of take over a little bit. And I broke a rule here. I didn't go dark enough for my reds. I'm going to have to paint from white. There's some exceptions to the rules, you know, a little shadow right there, a little shadow right there, and right there. And then we'll get a green that's the same level of black, which is a really nice thing about digital painting. I'll put a stem on it. Let's make it a curvy stem. There we go. And we'll have some leaves coming off of it. And we'll go with a little bit lighter. That's one of those exceptions right there to the painting black and white. But anyway. You get the idea. So that is a 50-cent art lesson, and it's what I know, and I hope it helps, and I hope it brings a little bit of justice to your situation, and I'm very happy to be your brother, and I'm very happy you're doing art, and I'm very happy you showed me and the world everything you have going on. God bless you, and I love you both. I love your children too, and I'm really happy we got to connect today. God bless you, Damon family. Bye-bye.